Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Brandes, Mr. Voss, members of the Council, guests and friends, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this evening's meeting. Allow me to thank the First National Bank of Maryland for sponsoring this evening's reception, honoring the Minister. Also allow me to announce that our next guest will be W. Alan Wallace, who is the Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs. He will join us at the World Trade Center on Tuesday, May the 10th. We're delighted to have Minister Helmut Schmidt with us. Schmidt, that would be another pleasure indeed. That will have to wait for another time, however. Dr. Schaefer, and if I don't do that again during the introduction, I'll be delighted. He serves as Minister of State at the Foreign Office of the Federal Republic of Germany, and he's going to speak on the foreign policy of Germany. He'll touch on several topics in the course of doing that: United States relations, the role of NATO, and North-South relations, and perhaps comment also on his recent trip to Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Minister Schaefer received his university degree in 1958. He taught in grammar schools in Rhineland-Palatinate shortly thereafter for a decade. He's been a member of the Free Democratic Party since 1964. And while in that party, he served in several positions of responsibility. He's been a member of their federal executive, 1972 to 82. He was chairman of their media commission, 79 to 83. And he served as chairman of the Free Democratic Party's Committee on Foreign, German, and European Affairs from 1985 to the present. He's also been a member of the Executive Committee of Liberal International. He's been a member of the Bundestag since 1977. He's been a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Bundestag from 1978 to 1987. He was Foreign Affairs spokesman of his party in the Bundestag from 79 to 87. And he's been chairman of his party's parliamentary group's working party on foreign and security, German, European, and development affairs from 1982 to 87. His work in the area of foreign affairs, of course, is in the tradition of Hans-Dietrich Genscher, of his party, who's been Vice Chancellor and Foreign Minister since 1974. Our guest became Minister of State at the Office of Foreign Affairs in March of 1987. It's my enormous pleasure to present to you our guest of the evening, Minister of State, Helmut Schaefer.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much to give me the opportunity to address such a very great group of people from Maryland, from Baltimore. And I should start by saying might be my 19th or 20th visit to the United States, but my first visit to Baltimore, and this is, I must say, a mistake. After I just had a short look at Fort Henry and at your very beautiful harbor area, which is architecturally very exciting, very good. I just feel a little bit ashamed again. It is not too much time to look around a little bit more, because I came from Washington, where we had talked this morning, arrived last night from Frankfurt, and this morning State Department, National Security Council, and tomorrow the Hill. So in fact it is only a short trip to your great city, but I'm very pleased and thank you very much for coming here to listen to me. Sometimes it would be more difficult to get such an audience in Germany at my party's meeting, I should say. So in fact this really impresses me very much. I should maybe, Mr. Chairman, make just some remarks to explain what my party is and what a state minister does. And should start with my party, which has an ominous name, because it's called Free Democratic Party. It has been in almost all German governments since World War II, with a short time under Adenauer. For about 4 years we were not in. So in fact we have been one of the stabilizing factors of the German democratic new republic we created in 1949, after World War II. And as you mentioned, Mr. Genscher, who was for a long time the president of my party, has now been, I think, the foreign minister with the longest time in office since he entered office in 1974 and has been foreign minister since then, which shows also a certain continuity in our foreign policy. The Liberal Party, it is sometimes called, the Liberal Party is not exactly what you would understand as Americans under the word liberal, because I know the connotation is very different. If it comes to liberal, sometimes you are put a little bit close to left wing. But if I might explain what this means in German, it is the old classical interpretation of liberalism, which means to support the individual against a state who is too strong, believes in freedom of economy, does not believe in pressures from pressure groups on the economy, is for free trade, is also, I could say, maybe to a certain degree close to what Republicans are up to in economic policy. But then we have this very difficult problem that at the same time, if it comes to civil rights, we would be closer to the Democrats. Because if it comes to women's rights, if it comes to certain progress in our society, we would combine somewhat of a free trade policy on one side, not too much state or no state intervention, but at the same time trying to develop individual rights against a state who constantly regulates the individual rights. So in fact it is some sort of a difficult combination. And of course this makes it difficult to explain to the majority of the people. We will always be a smaller party, but a decisive party, because most of our coalitions in Germany had been together with the Liberal Party, with the Free Democratic Party since 1949, as I mentioned, and this together as well with the Conservative Party, which we call Christian Democrats. We are in the government now, and from 1979 till 1982, actually also together with the 1969 to 1982, together with the Social Democrats in Germany, who are now the opposition party. As state minister, to also explain this, is the deputy foreign minister. He has to represent the foreign minister if he is out in the cabinet meetings, in government as well in parliament. I answer the questions of the deputies, of the members of parliament, as well as reporting from the government side in the Foreign Relations Committee, for instance, and represent the minister in all sorts of foreign relations affairs, meaning traveling, receiving delegations, ministers, all sorts of interesting people coming to Bonn every week, actually from all over, as you have the same experience here in Washington. Let me try to outline a few important items of our present foreign policy. I should say that Germany after World War II was absolutely clear no longer to remain in a vacuum. Our historic experience has made clear if we were isolated, we were lost. And so I think from World War II on, from the beginning of a new nation, of the shaping of the West German democracy up to now, the Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was a very important organization we still believe is necessary to go on in order to combine the most important Western powers to be ready and secure towards the East. This alliance has proved to be very successful, and we do stand to this alliance. There is no question about that. At the same time, of course, we were also absolutely clear about the fact in Europe that Europe cannot go on as it did for a long time by being split in different countries, fighting wars, being enemies, but that we had to unite, to slowly go into a process of unification of Europe, which started with the European Economic Community and is now going on towards, it's a long process of course, towards the European Union, including 12 European states now, as you know, where Germany and France play maybe the very important role of trying to push the other countries forward to more unity. And this, of course, is a very difficult task. It is not as easy, allow me to say so, than to form a country like yours by simply getting the original, by simply getting the occupation troops out, I must say, or simply unite certain colonies at a time where everybody was feeling that you had to go your own way to create your own constitution, and Baltimore has played a very important part in this great historical process of the United States. Europe is different and more difficult because of the long history of national states who never were very close to each other. We have different languages, different cultures, different civilizations, and of course different laws, different regulations. To give you an example, if we really come to what we call an internal market, a domestic market of those 12 countries in 1992, we finally want to end with all these border problems we still have if you go from Germany to France or from France to England. We have to do away with about 300 different laws of 12 different countries to harmonize not only our tax laws, which will be a very difficult problem, but also to harmonize transportation from one country to the other, and lots of other things, up to the question whether you can go on in one country driving on the right side and the other country driving on the left, or having different meters and different currencies. In the end, we also need a European currency, but this, of course, is a long way. We are on it, and I'm very happy that this year 12 chiefs of government agreed that we must do our homework. We must end up in 1992 with a domestic European market of the 12, which would give us even more economic possibilities. It means that 320 million people would be united, economic first of all, but also striving for a certain political unity. And it was the German government, especially my foreign minister, was always be in favor of finding a common European defense and a common European foreign policy. Not meant to get away from the Atlantic Alliance, but to come up to what also the United States want the Europeans to do, to be more responsible for themselves, to be more responsible and to play a more decisive role inside the Western Alliance, and also to help the United States in their manifold work, in their manifold tasks around the world. So in fact, this is a process which we have to go, which will be difficult, which will create lots of obstacles and national egotisms, but still we know there is no other alternative. And I believe that no country which joined the European community would leave again, because the advantages of this community are much higher than certain disadvantages which appear at the beginning. And one problem which developed during the last years of this European community was the worst. It was not defense, it was not foreign policy, it was, of course, agriculture, as you know. And here we still have lots of problems to solve, because lots of farmers fight the idea that we have to get away from a surplus, and we can no longer protect their interests. We can no longer subsidize them to a degree which brings us into lots of problems, also with the United States, also with other countries, who deplore certain protections in agriculture, which is necessary in order to protect the interests of the farmers in France, in Italy, in England, in Germany, and so on. Europe, Germany especially, is, of course, a country very close to the east. My country is the only one which was split. As you know, we have the borderline in the middle of this country. And this borderline of the wall, the barbed wires still existing, are the facts of a divided country, but also of a divided Europe. The wall is not dividing Germany, it's also dividing East and West, as you know. Insofar, it was another very important idea of our after-the-war foreign policy to find a way to go forward and get into contact, get into a discussion with the East, especially with the Soviet Union, in order to finally get away from this unnatural situation we still have, which is totally abnormal, which separates not only a country, but which of course separates people who are not allowed to leave their country. And that's what we called Ostpolitik, the politics towards the East, was a necessity. After 20 years of North Atlantic defense policy, we had to find a way to go forward and to try to come to more understanding between East and West. And certainly the question of disarmament has played a very important role in this process of discussing East and West. I don't want to go too deeply into this question of disarmament, but I should say, and should say this very clearly, we are very happy that the United States and the Soviet Union agreed on a total abolition of the medium short-range weapons which were installed in Germany and East Germany, which were weapons aiming only at Europe, and of weapons which we had to deploy in order to find some answer on a challenge the Soviets actually brought forward in the late 70s. We were, for a long time, in a tremendous domestic discussion on the deployment of American medium-range weapons on German soil, on German territory, which could hit the Soviet Union. And you know that the conference in Geneva was, for a certain while, interrupted. We believed if we remain strong, if we deploy, we will have a chance one day to do away with these weapons, which were not necessary. It did not exist in the 70s, and they were not necessary for what you call a flexible response. They hadn't existed before, so in fact we were very happy that you finally agreed on both sides of a total doing away of those weapons, including 100 missiles in Asia, which also helped the Asian countries away from a tremendous Soviet threat. And we consider this agreement as a first breakthrough between East and West on disarmament, which has to go on with more negotiations, including START. We expect the President in May to go on with a discussion in Moscow with Mr. Gorbachev on a possible split in the START, in the intercontinental missiles, as well as the chemical weapons we are discussing in Geneva, have been discussing for a very long time. We are also watching an approach of the two countries. There are possibilities there to a global abolition of chemical weapons. And the fourth and most important point for us now is the beginning of negotiations between the Warsaw Pact and NATO and the neutral states in Europe on the question of a conventional arms reduction, which means we have to do away with Soviet supremacy and find equal ceilings on both sides. And at the same time, this has to be a process which cannot only discuss the questions of armament, but should also include the other elements of the Helsinki process, which for the first time brought confidence-building measures. And these include, of course, the human rights question, which I think is extremely important, as well as a closer economic cooperation between East and West. We are in a situation where some people say we should not trust Mr. Gorbachev. We should first wait whether he will survive. Our position would be we should use the chance that there is something happening in the Soviet Union which you can no longer consider to be only a tricky sort of new policy, but which is a fundamental question. We don't know yet whether it will be successful or not, but the tremendous response of the Soviet society, of the non-communist Soviet society, and I always have to remind you of the idea that fact that out of a population of more than 200 million, you have only 7 to 8 million members of the Communist Party. The rest is not a member of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union, so we cannot address the Soviet Union as communist. You can only say the Communist Party is governing the Soviet Union. But we have to be aware that there is a tremendous expectation in the Soviet Union among the population that finally they have, for the first time, a chance to live differently, to get more for their money, to get closer to the West. They can watch not only by the thousands and thousands of tourists appearing in Russia every year from the United States, from Germany, from all the other Western countries, but they also can watch by television. That they also want to travel, that they also want to get a chance to get informed and no longer live in a closed society. It is a long way and there will be tremendous obstacles, but I think it is our responsibility in the West to do our best in order to give this process a strong momentum and not to sit here and wait and say, first of all, let's see how things will develop. We are not euphoric, but we should use the chance. This is our policy. This means we have to talk, we have to negotiate, we have to get forward on the fields I mentioned. This means armament, disarmament, questions of human rights, where we have, of course, the Soviet Union to simply bring forward and give in our demands. And at the same time, we should respond to the questions and demands of the Soviet Union that we should have a better cooperation in the economic field. And it is very interesting to meet Soviet economists today in Moscow, and they openly confess that their society, that their industrial system, that their commerce has failed, and that they have to copy the West to a certain degree. At the same time, and this is their dilemma, they say, but we certainly do not want to give up socialism. Anyway, I should give you a remark by the Hungarian ambassador in Bonn, who invited me about 4 weeks ago and invited lots of other Germans, and we had dinner together, and during this dinner he asked us a new joke. He said, do you know the new interpretation of socialism? And since there are so many interpretations of socialism, of course said no. And he said, I will tell you, it's very simple. It is the most complicated detour from capitalism to capitalism. So in fact, it might be true, I don't know, we should not be too optimistic, but even Hungarian ambassador of a country which is part of the East, in a meeting where he had lots of West German politicians at his table, is going for some sort of jokes. It's interesting what people think. And this is another interesting question. How do the Eastern countries, the Eastern European countries, watch what is going on in the Soviet Union? How do they behave? We can find out that for quite a while, they have been very eager to tell us, please, let's go on with our relations. We need your help. We do not agree when the Soviet Union and the United States get into more problems. We should go on with our policy, which of course means we need your help, we need better understanding, we need more openness, and we answer, please open your borders and give your people a chance to live the same way people can live here, at least freer, without being persecuted, without getting into prisons if they have different opinion, or if they want to form an opposition. Anyway, we are in the middle of a very interesting and striking process, and I think the West should be aware of the chances we have. We should not be too pessimistic, we should not be euphoric, we should think of our security, but we should also think of the possibilities given by a tremendous beginning of change, I would say, which is one of the most exciting event since the Soviet Revolution in 1917. It has never been such a situation in the Soviet Union during the last 40 to 50 years. And it's interesting how openly Soviet newspapers start to criticize, Stalin started to criticize a system which was immobile and sterile and created all these problems. But German foreign policy does not only deal with the questions of NATO, defense, of the East-West relations, of the attempt to unite Europe. We became a very strong trading partner of very many countries in the world. So even a certain sort of reluctance of the German foreign policy after World War II, which was of course easy to understand, so never get too much involved in any of the world's affairs. With this position we can no longer keep, we can no longer stick to, because the countries which we have been developed quite a good trade all over the world want us also to have answers in certain regional conflicts. And insofar, I think we are in a development. My country now has to take over more responsibility in the questions, together with other European countries, of regional conflicts in the third world. It would give me lots of speeches to go into the question, how should we react to a government which does not understand that in the end of the 20th century you can no longer go on with apartheid and with the separation of the races like South Africa. Or the question, how should we deal with this horrible Gulf War? We should also not say this is too far away when we were asked questions about the Central American conflict. In fact, the European community was very helpful to do its best in order to get the parties together at the negotiation table. Things have developed also in Central America, and I'm very happy because sometimes in this country there are people who were thinking there will never be a chance that they meet. They do meet, the Contras and the Sandinistas, and not only them. So in fact, I believe that even here the European countries could exert, besides the United States, a moderating influence on the parties. And you know that sometimes, especially in Latin America, people insist telling us that the United States do not understand their mentality. I don't know whether we understand it better, but anyway, we also have to come in with development aid. We should meet the people, we should try to help to overcome certain conflicts which mostly are not based on the question whether communism is going to win or the other side, but it's based on horrible social shortcomings. And to overcome these shortcomings will also do away with the roots for radicalism. We are, together with the United States, pretty helpless if it comes to fundamentalism, whether in Iran nor in other states. And I should include, and I don't want to go too deeply in this question, even in countries which are democratic, or at least say they are parts of the West. Also here we should like to ask, be careful and do not hurt human rights if you occupy certain territories. This is a very serious question. I know it is a very tremendous question in the United States, but we also should not ask for human rights towards the East, but we should in our own camp be ready to say, please, let's try together to find peaceful solutions by negotiations and not by forceful military actions. I think this is a critical question we have to deal with. The West is in the middle of this process. Your foreign minister, the Secretary of State, has developed a plan. We do hope it will be an international conference to bring the peoples of the Middle East together, that they live peaceful, that also the future of Israel will be secured. And it cannot be secured by saying we do not deal with this party and we do not deal with that party. We have really to ask, let's try seriously to sit together, to come together, to approach each other. This means the Palestinians as well, of course, as the Israelis. We want peace in the Middle East, and we do want that Israel goes into a future where there is no longer any attack. But you need the will to go forward, and this is a very critical and crucial situation. And the same thing we could apply to Iran, could apply to neighboring regions, and also we have to hope that the Pacific region, and this leads me to my last trip and also to my final remarks before you could ask me questions, that also in the Pacific region, but also in Asia, we have to help that certain developments can be stopped. It will be much more difficult because, again, religious fundamentalists are at work if it comes to India, if you think of the Sri Lanka development, if you think of other areas. We would like that the Russians also understand that it would be very helpful if they have a more constructive policy towards the former Indochina. The Cambodia question can be solved by more pressure on the Vietnamese, that this area also could be brought to a more peaceful solution. Maybe some remarks which come to the Pacific. I know that if you read German newspapers and German foreign relations analysts, very often in Europe there is a feeling America is turning away from Europe and it's turning Pacific. It's looking westward. And this is, of course, the evidence of those analysts are that President Reagan did no longer come from the East Coast, and his advisors also came from California, and they, of course, are not very much interested in Europe. I have never believed such stuff, because I know that America has a tremendous cultural tie to Europe, and I would not expect America during the next 50 years maybe to change so totally that you all look westward and to Asia and to the Chinese heritage, I don't know. But I think it is absolutely natural and normal, and it was to be expected that the United States turned to the Pacific because of commerce, of trade, of new possibilities, of new countries becoming very strong. Japan and China, India, lots of other countries. The Europeans were a little bit reluctant because this is very far away from us. But now I was there, I went to Australia, I went to New Zealand, two countries which are not Asian countries at all, but they are Pacific states who understand that they also are too far away from Europe and from the Queen of England, because this is about 20,000 miles almost, and they develop their own feelings, and they want to have a diversified trade relation. This means not to get totally dependent on Japan, not to be totally dependent on the East-West conflict in the Pacific critical situation, and they want Europe also to be in there as partner in commerce, as partner in politics. And I was impressed by one country which is, seems to be extremely exotic, and sometimes one has certain difficulties to find it. And this is Papua New Guinea, where I was the first German member of government to appear at all, because we thought this is not so extremely interesting and nobody knows too much about it. And I found out that this country is one of the richest countries in the world when it comes to raw materials, commodities, gold, copper, and so on. It will have a great future, and the Japanese are there, of course. So, in fact, I was told by the foreign minister when I came there, it was the first surprise to me when he said, "You are back home, Mr. Schaefer," and I had to think that there was a German colony many years ago. Germans have to be very happy that our colonial regime only lasted for about 30 years. So we were out in 1914, 1916. But people tend to romanticize such events. If it is 80 years ago, it's a nice German recollection there. I was really interested in the main mountain, or the highest mountain of this country is Mount Wilhelm, which was also a great surprise to me. But anyway, they told me, please do not neglect the islands, do not neglect the Pacific. This is a region which is growing, which becomes more and more interesting, where you have the first interesting events, no longer the famous South Sea romanticism, but there's Fiji with a coup, and there was Vanuatu with a fishery sort of agreement with the Soviet Union, and there suddenly two Libyan people appeared on another island and brought money from this famous colonel in Libya, who suddenly expands his policy to the Pacific. But anyway, it is a strategically most interesting, it's a commercially highly interesting region, and I think, together with the United States, the West has a chance even there to go on, to build up these countries, to try to help by development aid, but at the same time also to be good competitors in trade, which I think is always necessary. And I should like to make a remark, maybe at the end. Sometimes Europeans are criticized about bringing too many products into this huge country here. And one should stop this, and there is a big discussion on burden sharing. I know that agricultural protectionism can't go on in the European community. We have to stop this. On the other hand, it would be foolish to start a protectionism in this country. The question of trade deficit cannot be based or cannot be changed by protectionism. It has to be changed by the question, where are the real motives, where are the real problems? And I must say, I do not think the problems are that we do not spend enough money for our military. I do not think that we produce too many products which people like to buy here, which is of course a question of the American consumer, cannot be stopped by the state. We should be free to buy what we want, we do this too. We should sit together, we should talk about this problem. We should avoid a protectionist spirit which would create more trouble and turmoil, I think, also for this country, than it would help to stop a trade deficit. And this, I think, should be my last remarks, because when I went to this country and I was told I have to make so many speeches that I cannot possibly get too many prepared speeches with me, so let me just try to do it without any manuscript. I tried tonight, and you should forgive me that I covered maybe too much and that it was not so beautifully read out as it would have been if the foreign ministry would have prepared my text. I ask you to excuse me, but I should also like to cover all the questions you might ask me after this short speech, which was going over quite a few items, to come back to some details of what I mentioned only shortly. Thank you very much.
We thank you very much for an excellent overview. Yes.
So, Foreign Minister, would you give us the insight as to how Senator Kohl got the Germans to give up the intermediates? We heard you they're digging their heels in there real tough at the beginning. But then I never heard why they changed their mind.
The question is, did Mr. Kohl have difficulty persuading the German people to give up or to agree to the agreements on short-term missiles, short-range missiles?
I think it was a misinterpretation to say that, if I understood you well, that the Germans were against. Actually, this is not true. This is due to some of these fantastic American analysts. I remember a former Secretary of State who is one of the beloved foreign politicians in Germany, I think the most overrated politician in Germany. He gets always invited, and he is the analyst number one in Germany, but I think some of his analyses are wrong, Mr. Kissinger. I should mention him. It is not true that the Germans were against it. 90% of the German people say, thanks heavens that these things disappeared. You should always know, in our small territory of the Federal Republic of Germany, called West Germany, we have more weapons than any other country. I mean, relatively. There's no comparison all over the world. And it is only the size of the state of Oregon, and you have a fantastic amount of troops, more than 500,000. You have almost 1 million troops on this small territory, with all the maneuvers, with all those planes flying very low. I have all this problem as a member, of my constituency, of a representative constituency, where constantly people complain of all these planes, hundreds of planes. It is highly stuck with weapons. So in fact, the Germans say, please, let us go forward with our policy and do away. It's not true that there were certain problems inside his party, because there is a certain group in his party, the very right wing, who say every weapon we got, we should keep to, and this is not our policy. And they were convinced. It was only a small minority. They gave up in the meantime. We do hope the American Senate is going to agree on the INF. And as far as I was told this morning, Jesse Helmut came in with about 50 amendments. I don't hope it lasts too long to overcome these 50 amendments.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to pick up on a point you mentioned about trade. German products brought in here became a status symbol, you might say, for American stone. Mercedes, for example, BMW, Schaefer. I wonder, what is a German attitude toward American technology? They feel that our products are superior. Is there a status symbol owning, or what? Because I think if we're going to have trade, we have to respect each other's technology. I'm not so sure that Germans have been conditioned to respect our technology as somehow we become conditioned to respect it.
You've commented on the American media, and now you have an opportunity to comment on what Germans think of American technology and products.
Of course, Germany is full with American firms. Some German firms were taken over. We have close cooperation and joint ventures with lots of American firms. If you would come to my constituency, you would admire the amount of American firms being active there in different. If it comes to cars, of course, it is difficult because your cars are too big for the small German streets. This is, of course, not an explanation which you would be convinced of, but of course, they, in fact, are more expensive. They are very expensive, especially in the question of how much gas you need. So, in fact, German cars tended to be more economical, also smaller. And, of course, they had a certain success here, not because they were worse than the American cars. This is a question, of course. And there was, of course, a big debate in this country, as far as I understand, that American car factories for a long time had neglected the idea that oil might become shorter and that you may have smaller cars, more economical cars, and then was the big success of these smaller cars from Japan and Germany. But if it comes to lots of high technological things, for instance, IBM is the leading firm in Germany if it comes to computers. I think Mr. Bass, my personal assistant sitting here, he says yes. This is not true that there is no American product in Germany. There's lots of American products, almost in every field. Also in food, we have lots of American influence. Don't think of McDonald's only, but I think of our soups, which come which are not made by the Hausfrau, but which are bought in little things. That's all. It has German names, but in fact it's American owned. So in fact, there is, of course, on both sides, quite a few with it. But we do not like to have a surplus in our trade exchange. This is no good. We should have a balance, and this is also German policy, but it's very difficult at the moment. And also to do with dollar cost. But I'm not an economist too much, so I should be careful to go too much into the details. I might be wrong, Madam.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you comment on the possibility of formation of the European Central Bank? What are the major constraints? Are they traditional or are there technical matters that are more traditional?
If I understand your question, it's would you comment upon the constraints upon the...
There is a possibility, I believe, that you are going to form European Central Bank. What are the major constraints on the traditional or on the technical?
Yes, I understand.
What are the difficulties in forming a central bank?
The idea came from Germany. We said if we want to get the European currency, maybe EQ, which is the currency we have as some sort of fictitious currency now in trade, but which is not existing as paper money. We think we have to have a convergence of trade, of capital flow between the European countries. This should be liberalized first. On the other hand, we have to think of an instrument which would be coming, in our opinion, would be close to your Federal Reserve or to what we call Bundesbank in Germany, an institution which is independent from state intervention, which I think is very important. So this was our idea. The constraints are coming from countries like France and others who do not like the idea of an independent central bank. But I think there must be an institute which is responsible for a currency. If you create it, you have to have such an institute which controls this currency, and you should not leave it to governments to control the central bank. So in fact, this again is an idea we are just bringing forward. We have to discuss, and I think we will be able to solve in the end. It needs some years to come to such a bank, but if we want to have a European common trade, we need a common currency in the end. If we want to have European unity to a certain degree, we must have a European currency and not to a different currency. And this, of course, leads towards such a bank.
Does that satisfy your question about the difficulties or problems?
Difficulties from countries where we knew, that the idea of an independent central bank is new to them.
Sorry.
Why does the U.S. continue to maintain such a high military profile in Germany?
The question is, why does the United States continue to maintain such a high profile, military profile, in Germany?
We have about 300,000 American troops. We have about the double amount of German troops and other NATO troops in Germany because it is the border country. An attack on the West would most probably, if it was in Europe, of course, start in Germany. So in fact, this is the front line. And as you know, the next country west of us, France, is no military partner of NATO. They left to go left NATO. So in fact, you have to have a certain accumulation of troops in Germany. As long as you have such a tremendous conventional supremacy of the Soviets. Insofar, our policy would say, let's go into this most important disarmament field, the conventional arms reduction talks. And here, we would have a chance to get rid of the Soviet supremacy first. We would also have a chance to lower the western side to a common ceiling in east and west. And this would, of course, create the possibility to have fewer American troops and maybe fewer German troops in the West. But this should not be done. So I was always against this strong tendency in this country here to say we should reduce our troops because of the cost and so on. As long as we do not have negotiations in order to get the Soviets to do away with their supremacy in conventional forces, it would be disastrous for NATO if one country would do it one-sided. So in fact, we have to go, certainly with a burden share. I agree with this. But if I give you all the numbers of what we not only pay for our troops, but also for the American troops in Germany, which comes to a tremendous amount of money, one should not forget. And we do have a draft. You don't have, all Germans have to be drafted. So in fact, again, this is an expensive sort of thing. And it is, I think, a little bit unfair sometimes there's a discussion going on here saying they are not doing enough. We have been doing quite a lot, in fact, more in the last 20 years in comparison relatively than the United States if it comes to Europe. Now, it is not exactly the same amount anymore, but if we count together what has been paid for the rebuilding of the army, it is quite something. And we will go on, and we are absolutely sure that we have to pay our contribution, and the other European countries too.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to raise the question of the reunification of East and West Germany in three different ways. First, is it desirable? Two, is it feasible? And are there currently sentiments or aspirations in West Germany to proceed to try to do this?
Is it desirable and feasible to reunify the two Germanys, and how strong is public opinion in West Germany with respect to the issue?
To be honest and frank, I must say public opinion in West Germany is not dealing with this question as a main topic. Because people got used to the present situation, and the West Germans do not suffer from the situation the East Germans suffer from. This, I think, is the most important and feasible question that we have to ask the East to give in human rights, for instance, in the rights of traveling, to get out of the country, to try to have a higher standard of living, to be able to read the literature which is printed in the West. They can, of course, all of them can see Western television, and they do this constantly, which of course brings the government into certain problems because they are extremely well informed about what is going on, not only in the Bundestag and the debates which they are watching, but also about our products in all the advertising on television. So sometimes I'm really astonished what they know about products I've never heard of in my life, but they know exactly what sort of effect they have because they constantly watching Western. I think it is, of course, feasible to say such an unnatural situation cannot persist, cannot go on with a war in the middle of the city, with a division of Europe with barbed wire and with shooting at people who wanted to get out. This is not a normal situation. And I think the East does understand very well that such thing cannot contribute to the reputation of a superior society they sometimes thought they were. They do not mention it anymore at the moment. They say we are in the long run a superior society. Anyway, we can wait and see. But my feeling is that this is, as Afghanistan was, a very difficult problem for the East. Every people who go to Germany from third world countries might have heard about the war, but if they go to West Berlin and see the war, their feeling is totally different. They say, what is this? It cannot be true. So in fact, we have to work on a long-term policy which we would say would be a European solution of the German question. This would mean a reunification in a nationalistic sense for us is not the aim, but a situation in which the European states and countries agree that the present situation can be changed. Borders are open, maybe different societies, but peaceful, working together. I think the question of reunification is no longer so extremely important. We have to stick to it as German politicians because it's the preamble of our constitution says we have to. But we should be realistic, and if it's feasible to me to create what we call a European house, but I should add with free entrances, of course, for everybody, and with a free flow of information and free meeting of the neighbors inside this house. This is the main topic. And here the German question can be solved. And this needs a long-term policy, and of course everybody, including Poland, including France, should agree with such a solution.
Yes, the microphone.
You talked about a European bank. Will it be backed with gold? That is what the German people want to know, and the French. The other thing is, how will the world banks handle the $100 billion that the communist countries owe them? And I'd like to take advantage of one more thing. How long do you think the American people's patience should wait on Europe and the farmers? Because there is a chicken import from this state for export that has been going on for 20 years, because when I was there in Europe, I asked that question. So we've been patient for 20 years. How much longer do we have to be patient?
What's the view of Europeans with respect to gold backing the proposed central bank? What is the European view of the debt of communist countries, not the European view, but the view of Europeans and world banks on the debt of communist countries to other states? And then your third question is, how long will American farmers be expected to wait for lowering of barriers to their produce?
To try to make it very short, a European bank should be, of course, not only based on gold, it should be based on all sorts of currencies. We would have foreign currencies too, of course. As a present European single national banks in Europe work, I mean, it would be the same system actually. We only want the independence of such a bank from the state. We do not want to have it state governed. Secondly, how long the patience with the East to pay back its debt, it mostly refers to a country like Poland. You know that the biggest debt does not come from the Eastern countries, it comes from, as far as I understand, South America. Some of the big South American countries have more debts than the East together, I fear. And this is another problem I should not bring in, but I should say that we have to be careful in trying to come up to a slow recovery of Eastern countries like Poland, that they do not end in a total economic disaster which would not help us but would create problems and would bring us into different situations. So we have, of course, to be to a certain degree patient. By the way, the Soviet Union has also paid debts of Poland and other countries. One should not forget quite a bit of gold went out of the Soviet Union to pay for the Polish. And there is a certain hope that this, in the end, the Soviet Union understands it doesn't make any sense to constantly remain in these countries and have them in their grip because they cost too much money. We should not do just the opposite in order to bring the Soviet Union to take over all the debt and getting all these countries even more dependent on the Soviet Union. We should get them out of this grip. We should get them into a Central European order where they are free to make their decision whether they remain in the socialist camp or they get free and pluralistic. And the third question, with the farmers. This is, of course, an embarrassing question. And you know that if I go to my constituency, I always tell them, you are complaining that we get those cheap imports from the eastern countries. You know, we have to buy all sorts of agricultural products to Germany in order that they can pay back their debts again, which is also absurd because they don't have anything else. Geese from Poland and cherries from Yugoslavia. There's a terrible situation. So in fact, my farmers are extremely impatient and they say, you should stop this, you should no longer, you should have protectionism. And I tell them always, look, if the Europeans give cheap meat to the Western world, they destroy markets like the Argentinian markets and other markets. And if they do not take certain American products, this will create lots of problems with the United States and lead to a certain protection. It is a process. We are in the middle. We had results at the meeting of the prime ministers, presidents of the European states in Brussels in February, which created a plan that we give up, farmers have to give up land, will have a social sort of payment for it if they agree to simply get out of the, you know how difficult it is for farmers to give up their land and go to a pension which has to be paid nationally by the state. We also, what is the expression in English? I don't know its expression. To the set-aside thing, that we try to set aside the overproductive areas in order to create a reforesting and biotopes and whatever. And this is in the middle, but it was extremely different. Our farmers said we only agree if all European countries do the same, and not only the German farmers should do this. Now it was a consensus. So please be a little bit more patient, but you are right if you say there has to be a stop to any sort of protectionism of the European community. I'm against it. It will ruin our relations in trade, and it cannot go on.
Mr. Stern?
Could you tell us a little bit about the effect on NATO if the Danish government should, in effect, explore British and American ships bearing nuclear weapons from their ports?
Well, sorry. The question is, what would be the effect upon NATO if indeed Denmark bans ships bearing nuclear weapons from their ports?
You mean the New Zealand solution or something? We know that this is a big fight inside the Danish parliament. I can tell you that my foreign minister just has sent a letter to the Prime Minister of Denmark, and all the other European countries are doing the same to stop them from doing foolish things. They are partner in the NATO, and they cannot possibly go on and say this. We create restrictions of NATO troops. It is not possible. And Denmark is exposed in the Baltic Sea to the Eastern Navy. If you think of what happened to the Swedish coast when there were certain submarines suddenly appearing and disappearing, I wouldn't know exactly where they came from, but there are certain suspicions about it. I think it would be very foolish that the Danes at such a moment say we are following certain lines. They are partners of the NATO, and this, the Prime Minister of Denmark has said, would mean that we should be forced to leave NATO, which nobody wants. So again, as always in Europe, when you have to deal with very difficult questions of your neighbors, you have to be doing your best in order to convince that this is a little bit of a rhetoric which is damaging but cannot be made to facts, because this would also be very damaging for Denmark. So in fact, we will succeed in convincing them not to create such turmoil inside NATO and more problems. We do hope so. We do our best in order to prevent it.
But if they proceed with that policy, what happens then?
The Prime Minister said this would mean the end of our part of being in NATO. This would be a national disaster, and you have to face this, and therefore I ask for new elections. He said, this is a dramatic situation, please. I can no longer go on. We have new elections, and this is the item of this election. Everybody in Denmark must know if we do this, this means the end of our partner being a NATO member. And this is a dramatic thing.
Yes, sir.
Since you said you were an economist, I'll keep digging on that point. It looks like, regardless of sentiments among some people, as a result of inaction by the European Economic Community, and even more so on Japan, it's almost certain that trade sanctions voted in and increased reverse taxes. What would you imagine? What would you imagine would be the reaction of Germany and more generally the European Economic Community if this current bill that's in Congress gets passed over the veto of the President?
Should the Congress of the United States successfully impose trade sanctions on Europe and Japan, what would be Germany's reaction?
I could only speak about a European reaction. We would not consider this a very fair act because it would create new trouble, definitely. And I think it does not help, as I said before, to start with protectionist measures and hoping to do away with certain mistakes of an economy. I am really not an expert, but if you look at the debts of this country, I mean, if you look at the deficit spending for quite a time in this country, if you look at certain developments as the dollar went down, which was policy by the United States, which brought us into lots of problems, but not our trade with the United States, but other effects which ruined certain economies in the third world. One must be very careful in trying to find what seems to be a probable means in stopping those nasty Europeans and Japanese. In fact, the Europeans are very much complaining about the Japanese too, because they are terrible deficit. They have protectionist measures against getting things inside. We don't. This is only the farming sector where we have really a difficult problem to get 12 countries together and conservative governments to confront with a situation where you know you are losing the farming vote, which is a very difficult thing. But we have started, there will be progress, and definitely there has to be change. But if the Congress goes on with such a law and there would be sanctions put on Europe, I think the European community would answer with the same measures with sanctions on American products, which I absolutely, it is clear that the European community has already said, if they are doing this, we have to answer. But again, my government is against protectionism, on whatever side, also against the third world. We have almost given up our famous optic industry, which is governed by the Japanese, because maybe also of certain mistakes of the German optic industry for a certain. They did not watch what was going on. They were too late, and then they were done with. The same thing is with our textile industry, where we had to open our borders for products from the third world countries. We cannot simply say they give us raw materials and they get our costly heavy machinery. We have also to be ready to get textiles from and certain products from those countries, because it cannot go on. So in fact, we do not believe, as a member of the Liberal Party, I would say protectionism is something against my philosophy in economics. And it won't help in the end. It won't help at all. So in fact, we should try to overcome those problems by other means. But you are right in criticizing the European community in this agrarian question. Definitely, and this has to be changed.
The value-added tax will increase. The value-added tax that the European Economic Community imposes on all imports.
I should be more concrete. I don't know what you refer to. Which part?
Impuesto, the value-added tax on everything that's not from the economic community.
Would the value-added tax be increased is the question. The assumption is that there is a tax of some level on all goods which do not come from within the community. Would that tax be increased as one of the responses
of the Congress? I do not want to give comment on what the Commission in Brussels is going to do. But we should like to avoid such sort of commercial trade, a commercial war beginning between the United States and the European community. I think would be not very good for both partners. So again, I say we have to overcome our own economic problems, not by protectionist measures, but by the question what was wrong in our own economy, and how can we overcome these problems.
Mr. Gonzalez?
I believe I recall reading that Germany made a very substantial loan to Panama. If I'm correct, could you comment on that in light of our problems with the General Noriega?
I think the question is for you to comment upon Germany's relations with Panama, witness the loan which you have given to her, and our problems with her.
Of course, we have followed this fight going on. We have always insisted that no country in the world should have military dictators or military oppression. Insofar, we of course understand your policy towards Panama. I personally would be happier if the same strictness of policy would also be put on certain other countries. For instance, there's a famous famous South American country where a general has been in office for a long time, General Schaefer in Paraguay. And everybody knows, and has known for a long time, that his armed forces have been fantastic in dealing with drugs. I wonder why we were not so strict with them. This is a question I should like to ask American administrations. They are very anti-communist, which might be the reason for that. But I must say this is not exactly what is convincing the credibility of the West. If we do exert very strong measures against one general who is dealing with drugs, or allegedly, and tries to destroy pluralism. I agree with this, but on the other hand, we have other people going and making fake elections, forbidding newspapers, forbidding radio stations, and nobody comments on it. We are sure he is not going to join the East. This is one point, but this is not enough. For me, I should like to have a common Western attitude towards all sorts of these peoples and dictators, and not to the one and not to the other. This is something I've never quite understood.
What was the basis of your law?
But
What was the basis of your law?
the basis of
Your law.
Mr. Rich wants to know, why did you loan Panama money?
there is no loan, special loan to Panama. We have been giving development aid to all countries in Latin America for a long time. There is no new loan to Panama because you stopped the accounts here. But there is no loan. We do not support the present situation in Panama. But as far as I know, you can only refer to what we call development aid, which has been going on for all states in Latin America for a long time, including Panama, but not to the general, but going to certain organizations who help people, you know. This is not a government aid at all. So I don't know what we refer to. A loan which was given now, there is no new loan given. But
A couple months down the pipe would have been much more better to wait before you put that money.
no, we are very reluctant. We do not want to get involved in this sort of thing. We should like that things are changing in Panama, that there will be free elections. I know the ambassador, the Panamanian ambassador who left Germany because of Noriega taking over, is a friend of mine, and he sends me letters and says, help us because we are hidden somewhere in the area. And not only the President Del Valle is, but also some others are. And I know the situation there. So in fact, we are not in favor of the present situation. We want to have a change. But we did not give any loan to help Noriega. We have only been giving development aid for a long time. And I don't know whether the rate was given this year or not. It's absolutely new to me. I've never heard that there was any loan given to Panama, especially not at all. Couldn't imagine. Cannot be true.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like an elaboration or an elucidation of Mr. Schaefer's thinking in talking about Russia before, making the distinction, there are only 7 or 8 million members of the Communist Party. that seems to me to imply that anyone who is not a member of the Congress